So in the meantime, this is the course I have observed toward those who were accused before me as Christians. I asked them whether they were Christians. If they confessed that they were, I asked them a second and third time with threats of punishment. If they persisted, I ordered them to be executed. For whatever the nature of their admission, I had no doubt that stubbornness and inflexible obstinacy ought not to go unpunished. There were others also of the like insanity, but because they were Roman citizens, I ordered them to be sent to Rome.
Right. He had no authority as a provincial governor to execute a Roman citizen. That's why they were sent off to Rome. It is a bit odd, though, that Pliny had already executed some of the Christians before he even wrote his letter to Trajan. Perhaps he was under pressure. This is just conjecture, but perhaps he was under pressure from the local magistrates to act, or perhaps he knew more about previous cases of Christian trials than he was letting on in his letter to Trajan. But whatever the case, he seems to be confident of the legal grounds for his actions. Contempt and defiance of a Roman governor was a sufficient ground for execution, and he didn't have any doubts about that.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to ask him, he's going to ask this guy questions. It's someone who's under investigation. It doesn't even matter what the question is, but if he keeps asking him and the guy doesn't change his answer, that's enough to punish you, just because you're engaging in stubbornness or contumacy.
Right. Obstinacy, just resistance of the Roman official.
Wow.
So he had already executed some believers who persisted in their confession despite their being threatened with punishment if they did. And Pliny explains that one of the reasons he's consulting Trajan is whether he should admit accusations from anonymous persons. And in Trajan's reply to him, he tells him not to do so. So if you'll read the next section in the letter.
Right. Before long, as is often the case, the mere fact of the matter being investigated caused accusations to spread, and many more cases were brought before me. An anonymous placard was published containing many names of alleged Christians. As for those named in the document who denied that they were or ever had been Christians, I thought it proper to let them go, after I had them invoke the gods in words dictated by me, offer prayers with incense and wine to your image, which I had ordered to be brought for that purpose along with images of the gods, and curse Christ, things which, so it is said, those who are really Christians cannot be compelled to do.
Now, that is one of the most interesting parts of the letter. It tells us that Pliny came up with a procedure, a test, to determine who among those accused in the anonymous document was and was not really a Christian. And we don't know where Pliny came up with this idea. It could have been his own invention, but there also could have been some precedent for it. And some historians, in fact, think that he got the idea from what he heard about the trials of Christians under the Emperor Domitian, whose reign was from 81 to 96 AD. And according to Irenaeus and other ancient sources, John the Apostle was banished to the island of Patmos during the reign of Domitian. And at least part of the test bears resemblance to what's found in the book of Revelation, particularly worshiping the image of the beast, Revelation 20, verse 4. And Patmos was off the coast of Ephesus in Asia Minor, which had been the strongest center of the imperial cult, the worship of the emperor, since the time of Augustus Caesar.
Wow.
Now, Pliny published his letters. That's why we have them today. Pliny actually published all of his letters. And it's in part because he published his letters, this procedure that he records here becomes well known. And during the reign of a later emperor named Decius, who reigned in the middle of the 3rd century, this procedure became mandatory. And that's when, for the first time, there was an empire-wide persecution of Christians. Prior to Decius, there were lots of persecutions of believers, but they were local and sporadic. But under the reign of Decius, it was an empire-wide persecution. So the test that Pliny came up with to determine whether someone was a Christian had the accused do three things. First, they had to repeat after him a formula of invocation to the gods, call upon the name of the gods. So he dictated to them an invocation which they had to repeat. Secondly, they had to offer supplications with incense and wine to an image of the emperor and to images of the gods, the Roman gods. And finally, they had to curse Christ, to revile the name of Jesus with a malediction. And Pliny had been informed by others that those who were really Christians could not be compelled to do those
Yeah.
things. Now, Pliny goes on in his letter to refer to a group of apostates, those who had defected from the faith and had renounced Christ. They admitted that at one time they were Christians but had left the faith. And Pliny did not know if they should still be punished or not. That's one of the reasons he's writing Trajan. And so, would you read the next little section in the letter?
Absolutely. Others, named by the informer, said that they had been Christians but later renounced it, explaining that they had been Christians at one time but had ceased to be such some 3 years ago, some a good many years ago, and one even 20 years ago. All these worshipped your image and the statues of the gods and cursed Christ.
Now, one of the things to point out here in this paragraph is that the content of the next paragraph in the letter, which is the part of the letter that describes early Christian worship, comes from the apostates who had defected from Christianity sometime before. So the account of Christian worship that Pliny gives us in this letter, dated to 112, predates the actual writing of the letter as much as 20 years, because at least one of the apostates said that he had left the faith some 20 years ago. So that would be about 92 AD. And so that just tells us how early this account of Christian worship is.